Jackson, Chair of the National Endowment for the Arts. For accessibility purposes, I am a woman. I have dark curly hair. I'm wearing a black jacket and a black and white top. Welcome, members of the National Council on the Arts, arts leaders, NEA staff, members of the public, and members of the press. Thank you for making time to be with us today. For the record, joining us in person are Christopher Morgan, Waskar Medina, Keenan Asme, Michael Lombardo, Rani Ramaswamy. Joining us virtually are Bitta Becker, Bruce Carter, Connie Williams, Emil Kang, Gretchen Gonzalez Davidson, Ishmael Ahmed, Camila Forbes, Maria de Leon, Paul Hodes. Absent today are Aaron Dorgan, Deepa Gupta, Fiona Prine, and Jake Shimabukuro. And now, please welcome Donna Collins, Executive Director of the Ohio Arts Council, to say a few words. Donna.
Before I begin my remarks, many of you in this audience and those who are listening on the stream knew Wayne Lawson, the Director Emeritus of the Ohio Arts Council. Wayne passed away in a week or so ago, and so instead of a moment of silence, let's have a moment of celebration for everything that Wayne Lawson did for all of us as friends. He was our mentor, he was a leader, he was visionary, and we know the work we do at the Ohio Arts Council is because of the work he did when he was our ED. So let's hear it for Wayne Lawson. And quite frankly, if we'd have had a moment of silence, I would not get rest for many days. I know that. So on behalf of the 11.7 million residents of the Buckeye State, the Ohio Arts Council Board, chaired by Ginger Warner, and my team are honored to welcome the National Council on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts here to Ohio. We also welcome all of you in the audience here in Columbus and those of you watching across the nation. A word about us. The Ohio Arts Council is a state agency that funds and supports quality arts experiences to strengthen Ohio. Communities are culturally, educationally, and economically better because we're all working together. We help Ohio excel by investing, innovating, engaging, and leading through our world-class arts and cultural sector. It's all about you. Yesterday, members of the National Council and the NEA staff visited with artists and organizational leaders in Southeast Ohio to experience how the arts impact rural communities. And of course, that's in line with the focus of today's convening. At the OAC, we know and we value Ohio's rural communities. Through our work, Fund Every County, the Ohio Arts Council actively makes grants in all 88 counties, including our 72 counties classified as rural or partially rural. I know, you can clap. Oh, there are colleagues from Southeast Ohio. Additionally, the state of Ohio has demonstrated a serious commitment to providing opportunity for access for rural residents. Governor Mike DeWine, Lieutenant Governor John Husted, and the Ohio General Assembly recently invested $500 million in 32 Appalachian counties through Ohio's Appalachian Community Grant Program, supporting infrastructure, workforce, healthcare priorities. The entire region is benefiting. These opportunities also incorporate the arts and culture as key project components. Furthermore, another $89 million investment was recently announced to help a dozen or so rural school districts build community wellness, education, and career development centers. We hope our state's investment can be a model for others. This morning, I'm pleased to tell you that the governor signed into state law the state's capital appropriation budget totaling $6.2 billion, with a B, billion dollars, which includes millions of dollars for the arts. Yep. The investments continue to grow, and Ohioans are direct beneficiaries. Our continued appreciation and a thanks again to Governor DeWine, Lieutenant Governor Houston, and the entire General Assembly. We are so grateful to have showcased Ohio's rich geographic and cultural diversity during the course of your visit, Council and staff of the NEA. And it's time well spent in Ohio. We're glad you joined us, and we hope to see all of you here again soon. Maybe you could have your next meeting here too. I'm not sure the staff will be excited about that, but it's a lot of work. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for the folks listening online. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Zach Compton, the fabulous, wonderful Vice President of Education and Community Engagement with the Columbus Jazz Youth Orchestra and Jazz Arts Group. Zach.
Good morning. I first want to acknowledge Donna Collins as an arts manager in Ohio and a product of rural Ohio and now raising a family in central Ohio. I personally am humbled at the work and the passion that she exudes for enriching all of our state through the arts. And there are several generations now of arts managers who can thank Donna in part for their advancement and their love of this field. So a huge thank you to Donna Collins. I'm proud to come to you on behalf of the Jazz Arts Group of Columbus, America's oldest and first nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing the art of jazz through performance and education. Just last fall, we celebrated and wrapped up our 50th anniversary as the Jazz Arts Group, and we had celebrations of the Columbus Jazz Orchestra with internationally renowned artistic director of the CJO, Byron Stripling, amazing concerts here on the stage of the Lincoln Theater, and of course our education programming. But one thing I want to tell you is that as we rounded the corner of our 50th anniversary, there was a task at hand to forge the future of our organization, and that was to hire a new CEO. I would like to introduce to those of you in the audience one of the brightest arts leaders and visionaries who is back to Columbus for the second time. Our CEO, Katie Coy, is here. That may be a familiar name to some of you, and if not, I encourage you, those in attendance, to speak with Katie and learn more about what Jazz Arts Group is up to in the reception to follow. But I'm here to share with you a living example, so to speak, of a fact that we all know. Arts education has the power to transform lives of our children. Those of you that are here know that. You live that fact out in your lives. Here at Jazz Arts Group, I've been humbled for almost 12 years to oversee the education and community engagement arm of our organization. We believe the simple fact that jazz, America's art form, can be utilized to inspire people of all ages to be more creative, to find their individual voice, to come together as a diverse group of people, and to do better for our world. That starts with pre-K. We go into classrooms using jazz as a tool for classroom readiness in some of the most at-risk communities here in our city. We continue that teaching history and the magic of this music, the connection that this has to our American history, which is forged with the blues, the black experience in our country, and so many more sort of inextricable links to what jazz is all about. And then we teach them how to play and use the music for their creativity and their voice. So just upstairs here on the 4th floor at our Jazz Academy, 30 students are wrapping up their week 2 of summer camp, where they will go over to our beautiful Columbus Metropolitan Library and perform their final performance. And we will present today a segment of our Columbus Youth Jazz students as well. The Columbus Youth Jazz program consists of 100 students from Central Ohio that come on Sundays to the Jazz Academy upstairs on the 4th floor from 7th through 12th grade. These are instrumentalists and singers. Some of them are in the urban school setting, some of them in suburban, and some of them, in fact, as far away as Dayton area and Cincinnati area. And they come to play jazz. And the result is so many things. They go on to be engineers and doctors and, of course, professional musicians. But what we found is the outcome of our work is that they're better human beings because they found their musical voice, they found a connection to who they are, and found a way to share that with others in a very democratic way that jazz is able to represent. So it gives me great privilege to introduce 5 students throughout the course of the day, 2 of them on this set this morning. The first of which is a student who just graduated from Bexley High School here in Ohio, Central Ohio, and will go on to the Ohio State University to study jazz studies, and he's a wonderful trumpeter, but today he brings an original piece to you entitled A Walk in the Park. Will you please welcome Jordan Steinbrook to the stage?
Thank you, Jordan. That was beautiful. Another round of applause for Jordan, please. And thank you to Donna and to Zach for their remarks earlier today. A little bit of context. Established by Congress in 1965, the National Endowment for the Arts is an independent federal agency charged with making sure that all the arts are available to all Americans. By advancing equitable opportunities for arts participation and practice, the NEA fosters and sustains an environment in which the arts benefit everyone in the United States. We are a funder, a grant maker, and also a national resource. We're a convener, connector, a catalyst, and we bolster arts, design, and culture in all communities. The National Council on the Arts advises on agency policies, programs, and grants. Our first order of business will start with the minutes from our last meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting on March in 2024?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now, please welcome Ayanna Hudson, Chief Strategy, Programs, and Engagement Officer at the National Endowment for the Arts. Welcome, Ayanna.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. Good morning. Good morning. For accessibility purposes, I'm an African-American woman with shoulder length, black hair with bangs. I'm wearing black rimmed glasses, red lipstick, a white shirt, and a colorful jacket. Now we will proceed with the application review section of the agenda. The tally of the votes will be announced at the end of today's session. The council will be voting today on award recommendations totaling more than $1.4 million in the Grants for Arts Projects and National Initiatives categories. For your vote to be tallied, you must be either present in the room or join the meeting via video conference or telephone at the time of the motion, discussion, and vote. Council members joining us by video conference or phone, you must email your votes to Kim Jefferson immediately at the conclusion of this part of the meeting. Council members' affiliations are recorded in the council book and later will be attached to your emailed votes. Each member has been provided an opportunity to update this information prior to the meeting. Council members are recorded as not voting on applications with which they are affiliated. This list becomes part of the agency's official record. May I have a motion to consider the recommendations in the council book?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
I will now summarize the Grants for Arts Projects, or GAP category, and then ask you to mark your ballots. The Grants for Arts Projects category provides expansive funding opportunities to strengthen the nation's arts and cultural ecosystem. Through project-based funding, the program supports opportunities for public engagement with the arts and arts education, for the integration of the arts with strategies promoting the health and well-being of people and communities, and for the improvement of the overall capacity and capabilities within the arts sector. The GAP project recommended today is a money amendment for a literary arts grant that was recommended with the second group of GAP applications brought to the council in March 2024. Additional funding totaling $30,000 will allow faculty members from historically black colleges and universities to address the absence of Master of Fine Arts programs at HBCUs nationwide. Through this convening, they will assess current creative writing offerings and needs, identify challenges, and outline a strategic roadmap for the development of a future MFA program. Please mark your ballot. I will now summarize the National Initiatives category and then ask you to mark your ballots. National initiatives support a wide variety of projects of national and field-wide significance. At this meeting, the council is requested to approve funding for 3 projects totaling more than $1.4 million. Continued support is requested for the Mayor's Institute on City Design, a program that assists mayors with urban design challenges, promotes design excellence and economic revitalization, and enhances the livability of communities across the country. An NEA research lab, which will continue implementing a research agenda that explores whether and how arts and cultural districts support diversity, equity, and inclusion. The research lab will investigate how such districts can become effective drivers of economic and social change while remaining diverse inclusive, and equitable places. And a national services initiative that will support research, information, and professional development services for the National Endowment for the Arts, state arts agencies, and the 6 regional arts organizations, in cooperation with the agency's state and regional arts education and folk and traditional arts programs. Council members, you may now mark your ballots. Council members joining virtually, you may now email your votes to Kim Jefferson. Finally, we turn our attention to the projects in the award update section of the council book. These projects have been awarded under the chair's delegated authority and are brought to the council's attention at this meeting, but no vote is necessary. Included in this section are 2 extraordinary actions, 1 interagency agreement, and 3 20% amendments. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayanna. In the next few minutes, I'll share some updates with you since our last meeting in March. On April 13th, the NEA, in partnership with the Kennedy Center, hosted the 2024 NEA Jazz Masters Tribute Concert. Amina Claudine Myers, Gary Bartz, Willard Jenkins, and Terrence Blanchard were this year's class of NEA Jazz Master Fellows. The night was filled with captivating stories honoring each of these luminaries for their efforts to preserve and advance the art form. The concert is available to watch on demand on the NEA YouTube channel. On May 1st, I testified before the House of Representatives Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Appropriations Subcommittee on the fiscal year 2025 NEA budget request. For fiscal year 25, the NEA has requested an appropriation of $210.1 million to carry out its mission to foster an environment in which the arts benefit everyone in the United States. It was an honor to speak before the subcommittee to highlight the NEA's work in communities of all kinds. We're proud to lift up how the arts strengthen our communities, contribute to our economy, and promote our well-being. It was also heartening to hear bipartisan support and appreciation for what the NEA does and what we help make possible in communities all around the country. On May 1st and 2nd, the NEA and the Poetry Foundation welcomed 55 state and jurisdictional champions to participate in the 2024 Poetry Out Loud National Semifinals and Finals. It was inspiring to see these students bring poems to life. This year's winner was Nivea Glover, a 12th grade student at Douglas Anderson School of the Arts in Jacksonville, Florida. Recordings of her and other participants' performances are available on the NEA's YouTube channel. Special thanks to Council Member Huáscar Medina for serving as a Master of Ceremony at the final event. Also in May, the NEA announced the 2024 Blue Star Museum season. The Blue Star Museums program is a collaboration between the NEA, the Blue Star families, and the Department of Defense. The program offers active military families free admission to partnering museums nationwide. And the 2024 program began on Saturday, May 18th, which is Armed Forces Day, and continues through Monday, September 2nd, Labor Day. Participating museums can be found in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. On May 15th, the NEA announced its second round of grants for fiscal year 2024, and those were approved by Council back in March. The NEA awarded more than $110 million in grants for arts project, Our Town, and the state and regional partnerships funding categories. Recipients include organizations from all 50 states and U.S. jurisdictions. More than 1,200 grants for our arts projects. Our Town grants were approved for funding. On June 10th, I participated in an event hosted at the White House with the White House Domestic Policy Council as part of the Juneteenth commemorations, our newest national holiday. I spoke on the importance of the arts and culture in preserving and advancing Black culture and history, defending our humanity and dignity, and in expressing our trials, triumphs, and joy. We continue to build on the momentum of the Healing, Bridging, Thriving Summit, which we held in January, and we're strengthening relationships across the federal government to integrate the arts into diverse areas of policy and practice. As mentioned at the last council meeting in February, we kicked off an interagency working group on arts health and civic infrastructure. This is co-chaired by Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra and me. And we held our second meeting in May with 20 agencies participating. And in his remarks, I'll quote Secretary Becerra, who said, "As we look towards the future, we have the opportunity to weave the power of the arts into our efforts to support a wellness care system. We know that arts and culture can have profound impacts on health. Access to the arts is not a luxury. It's a resource that should be available to all." We continue to appreciate our growing relationships with the federal family and especially the Department of Health and Human Services through this effort. I'll talk a little bit about recent travel. In addition to these agency-wide activities I just mentioned, I've had the privilege to visit communities across the country and engaged with a range of organizations and audiences since the last time we met. In mid-April, I traveled as part of the U.S. delegation to Venice, Italy for the Biennale Arte 2024. The Biennale provides a unique and prestigious opportunity to promote cross-cultural understanding and exchange. This year, in collaboration with the State Department, the NEA helped support the exhibition of artist Jeffrey Gibson, who is Mississippi Choctaw and Cherokee. He is the first Native American artist to hold a solo presentation at the American Pavilion at the Biennale. His work lifts up the resilience of Native and Indigenous people and offers a fuller narrative of American history. Later that month, I joined the Doris Duke Foundation in New York City for the Creative Labor, Creative Conditions Symposium. I spoke with Foundation President Sam Gill in a fireside chat about the importance of viewing arts professionals as workers and recognizing their contributions to the creative economy and beyond. We discussed the changing landscape of the creative economy and the lessons that can be applied to help secure fair compensation for arts professionals. On May 8th, I joined the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C. at their Board of Trustees for a panel moderated by the New York Times reporter Emily Badger on the future of downtowns. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed our ways of working and the character of our downtowns, and the panelists and I discussed how the arts can play an important role in reimagining downtowns and ultimately can be key elements of new versions of places that offer benefits for all residents. On May 10th, I returned to one of my alma maters, the University of Southern California, Price School of Public Policy, to deliver commencement remarks. I discussed the role of the arts in tackling our most pressing issues as a society, allowing us to see things from different perspectives, and in strengthening our civic infrastructure and democracy. While in Los Angeles, I also met with President and CEO of the Recording Academy, Harvey Mason Jr. In our conversation, we discussed the power of music and how it can improve individual and community health and well-being, as well as the NEA's history of work at that intersection. In addition to this, we spoke about the effects of artificial intelligence and the need to protect the rights of artists. I also had the opportunity to participate in a keynote panel conversation at the American Alliance of Museums annual conference in Baltimore, alongside Dr. Susan McSalmon of Johns Hopkins, Terry Lee Freeman of the Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture, and Renee Fleming. We examined the role of museums and cultural institutions to promote thriving communities. The conversation provided an opportunity to help shift the paradigm of museums and cultural institutions to enter the civic arena and more fully embrace their roles as consequential community assets. Toward the end of May, I traveled to Puerto Rico to join the Association of Arts Administration Educators for their conference, and the theme this year was Intersections and Innovations. In their opening keynote, I spoke about the range of ways that the arts contribute to healthy, vibrant places and how we can prepare arts leaders to take the reins, deliver positive impacts, and strengthen arts ecosystems. I also had the opportunity to meet with Rosario, one of 6 organizations selected by the Environmental Protection Agency to host an artist in residence as part of the new EPA-NEA initiative announced back in January at the Healing, Bridging, Thriving Summit. Their incoming artist in residence will focus on community engagement to restore a ravine known to be affected by illegal dumping and pollution. Additionally, we met with Urbe a Pie and the Flamboyant Foundation, and we discussed their work as a cultural resilience hub. Through the support of the Flamboyant Foundation, Urbe a Pie provides basic emergency services and cultural programming in the wake of natural disasters. This helps to promote long-term recovery and social cohesion, well-being, as well as provides employment to local artists. On May 30th, I visited Uvalde, Texas. We were welcomed by Uvalde teachers Mary Santos and Elaine Valenzuela, who shared their experiences from the Uvalde Love Project. The NEASA helped to support the Uvalde Love Project through a Chair's Extraordinary Action Award to Mid-America Arts Alliance. The project involved the creation of a deeply meaningful mural created over the course of 40 community art sessions. The Uvalde Love Project is a testament to the power of art to help individuals and communities process and begin to heal from tragedy. The following day, I traveled to Austin, and I spent the morning at Art Spark Texas, a new Creative Forces community engagement grantee. And while at Art Spark Texas, I met with local veterans who have participated in Art Spark Texas programs, and I announced nearly $770,000 in Creative Forces community engagement grants. And these grants support organizations that create opportunities for service members and military-connected people to engage with art, which contributes positively to their quality of life. That afternoon, I joined a group of local community and arts leaders to discuss opportunities for integrating the arts into infrastructure projects and more. It was a fantastic conversation. It was wonderful to hear about how the arts can unlock our creativity and contribute to our best work, including the work of building our new infrastructure in cities. I look forward to seeing what comes out of the conversations and what the organizations will do as the year continues. In early June, I was in Honolulu, Hawaii, as part of the U.S. delegation to the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture, also known as FESPAC. FESPAC is the largest gathering and celebration of Pacific Island nations and culture and takes place every 4 years. While there, I met with arts leaders from the Pacific Island jurisdictions, Guam, American Samoa, and the Northern Marianas Islands, to help strengthen our relationship with them and to help identify opportunities to increase our support of their arts ecosystems. In mid-June, I traveled to New Haven, Connecticut, joining Representative Rosa DeLauro. It was inspiring to see the city through her eyes. We began our time there with a visit to the New Haven Botanical Garden of Healing, which relies on arts and design to help communities heal from gun violence. Following our visit to the Botanical Garden, we held a roundtable conversation with NEA grantees and local leaders to hear about the work taking place in New Haven. We finished our day at the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, featuring wide-ranging performances and opportunities for arts engagement that touched on history, climate change, and many other topics. On June 17th, the NEA and the National Alliance for Musical Theater brought together the 8 winning high school students for the Musical Theater Songwriting Challenge concert in New York City. The students worked with industry professionals to produce fully orchestrated renditions of their compositions, which were sung live by Broadway performers. This was an inspiring concert, and it's available for on-demand viewing at arts.gov. Last week, I traveled to Chicago for the Theater Communications Group's annual conference, and I provided an update on the NEA's work to support the theater and performing arts sector and the role of the NEA as a national resource. Again, a convener, connector, catalyst, and amplifier, in addition to our funding work. Yesterday, NEA staff, National Council on the Arts members, and I had the opportunity to visit Passion Works Studio and Mount Zion Black Cultural Center, two local organizations in Athens providing services to Appalachian, Ohio. Engaging with the arts workers and leaders from these organizations was just wonderful, it was inspiring. Passion Works is a nonprofit that provides career opportunities for artists with developmental differences who use upcycled materials to develop environmentally responsible and sustainable art. And Mount Zion Black Cultural Center is the recipient of a Citizens Institute on Rural Design grant used to restore and transform a 150-year-old building into a community center and asset that preserves and presents the contributions, history, concerns, and aspirations of Black Americans in Southeast Ohio. These organizations illustrate the power of the arts in a number of ways, and they reflect the importance of the arts to rural communities. As we'll soon hear, the arts play special, crucial roles in small towns and rural places across America. Arts, culture, and design are vital economic drivers, foster social cohesion, create connection, help express local character and identity, and honor local histories, and more. They're critical to building thriving and vibrant communities. We're committed to increasing access to the arts, helping organizations and leaders unlock opportunities for community uplift through the arts, and ensuring equitable opportunities for arts engagement throughout the country so that every person has the opportunity to live an artful life. So, with that, before we transition to the next portion of the program, I'm excited to introduce National Council on the Arts member and renowned clarinetist and composer Keenan Asme, and Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra member Benjamin Adams. They'll perform one of Keenan's original compositions. Please join me in welcoming Keenan and Ben to the stage. thank you, Keenan and Ben, for that beautiful collaboration and inspiring performance. And they just gathered, I think, yesterday and today to practice that. It's amazing. Another round of applause, please. Thank you. Recognizing that some communities, including rural communities, may have been underserved historically by grant funding opportunities, the NEA is dedicated to strengthening existing national initiatives like the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. Special initiatives take into account the unique characteristics of rural places and provide support to organizations where opportunities to lift up culture and experience the arts from many sources have been limited as a result of systemic inequities related to geography, economics, disability, ethnicity, among other factors. As part of this work, the NEA is showing up as a national resource, supporting and producing research on impacts of the arts. We're facilitating the integration of arts across the federal government to benefit all and create new and more opportunities for artists and arts workers. And we're also increasingly asserting as a convener, as we are doing here today. We've gathered a group of leaders who are doing transformative work in small towns and rural communities to engage in conversation with NEA Director of Design and Creative Placemaking, Ben Stone. These conversations will provide insights into needs and opportunities in rural communities and small towns. So please join me in welcoming our first group of leaders in conversation.
Everyone, good morning or afternoon, I think at this point. I'm Ben Stone, Director of Design and Creative Placemaking with the National Endowment for the Arts. Thank you for that introduction, Chair Jackson, and for your leadership. Thank you also to Keenan and Ben for that beautiful and very hard to follow performance. I'll do my best. For accessibility purposes, I am a 40-ish-year-old white man with a short beard and bright green suit. We'll be a colorful group on stage in just a moment. And my job for the next couple minutes is to set the context for the rural arts and design conversation we're about to have, explain the format of that conversation, let you know what you all are about to witness, and then tell you what I think some of our goals are for all of you today, what we hope some of the takeaways from our conversations will be. Much like the arts world in general, from my perspective at least, the rural world is sometimes hard to speak about with broad strokes. Just like the arts world is divided into many different disciplines, rural communities are quite different, and when you start talking about rural places, you often slip into cliches. So rather than trying to characterize what is rural America, I will just tell you just for a couple of minutes what really has drawn me to participate in rural arts and design and community development work for the last decade or so. And for me, as somebody who's never lived in rural America, it's really about the fact that I started my professional career, working at the neighborhood scale in my hometown of Baltimore, which is of course not a rural place at all whatsoever. But I will just say that working at the neighborhood level, the neighborhood scale, even in an urban place, much like in rural places, you find leaders who wear many, many different hats. Many of us who were participating in the conversation last night heard from some leaders who wore so many different hats and serve in different kinds of roles, including roles that perhaps you're not even professionally trained for, but just get roped into doing. If any of you have ever joined a neighborhood association or volunteered in your neighborhood, maybe you've been in a similar position. Just share a quick anecdote. In a recent site visit to Grenada, Mississippi, I was somewhat humored to learn that our bus driver was actually a mayoral candidate running for office. And then also recently in Two Harbors, Minnesota, where I was for another CIRD workshop, I learned that the nonprofit leader we were working with was also our shuttle driver for the day. And I also was just reminded by Omar, who you'll hear from in a minute, who is a trained architect and works with us in the CIRD program, also has a commercial bus driving license. So if you learn nothing else today, you'll learn that everyone in rural America drives buses. I also have noticed that, and we heard about this a little bit yesterday in our visits, that many people in rural places feel a little bit left out or forgotten in favor of leaders perhaps thinking about their urban neighbors. And I think many people who work at the neighborhood scale think about the same sort of thing, or are struck by that, and that leaders are sometimes focused on downtown development projects rather than what's going on in the neighborhoods, and there's often a desire to have people actually recognize the important work that's happening at that scale. And then just the importance of collaboration. You know, working in a rural place, you can walk around in a whole town and gather everyone you need on your team to complete a project. The same thing's true when you're working within a neighborhood. You can find everything you need, much like some of us discovered, and you heard about just a moment ago in Athens, with Passion Works, working in one part of town. We then saw their work at every other stop on our site visit. And perhaps a somewhat more cynical take on that, to say the same thing in a more cynical way, is that if you have ever done work at the local level, the neighborhood level, or in a rural community, you know you have to stay on good terms with the people you work with, because if you piss someone off, you're going to see them all the time, because they're your neighbors, and there's no escape from any of them. So we're going to have two 15-minute conversations with two different groups of panelists representing a project here in Ohio, in Athens, and another in Minnesota. We'll then have 15 minutes of Q&A with our council members after that. I'll moderate the first panel and hand it over to Ash Hansen to moderate the second panel. What I hope we are able to take away from our conversations today is that I hope we can understand some of the unique challenges and opportunities facing rural arts and design leaders. I hope we can dispel some of the myths and stereotypes about what it means to be a rural leader in terms of race and ethnicity, and who gets to call themselves part of rural America and represent that part of our society. We'll talk about some of the needs that these leaders have, some of the things that are working, some of the things that perhaps are not working as well, that all of us who support them could perhaps do better. The importance of physical spaces to represent some of these invisible communities that are kind of outside of our normal perception of rural America. And then just get inspired by some of the really charismatic, wonderful storytelling leaders in the rural places we'll be discussing in just a moment. So to get to those conversations, I'll bring up our first two speakers, Omar Hakeem and Dr. T. Ford Ahmed. Thanks.
Check. This one's on.
Omar has this on, okay. Well, hi again, everybody. So we're joined right now by Omar Hakeem, who is the founder and principal of To Be Done Studio. TBD is one of our partners who runs, along with the Housing Citizens Council, and the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. I heard about this a moment ago, the leadership initiative of the National Endowment for the Arts. Sitting just to my right is T. Ford Ahmed, who is the Director of Communications for the Mount Zion Baptist Church Preservation Society in Athens, Ohio, which we visited, some of us visited yesterday. So at the risk of setting you up, T, for a question or an answer that could take the full rest of our time here today, I'd love for you to tell us just a little bit about the importance of the Mount Zion Baptist Church and what its role is in Black Appalachia.
Okay, representing Mount Zion Black Cultural Center, doing business as the Black Cultural Center. It is located in Athens, which is the southeastern part of the Ohio River Valley, along the route of the Underground Railroad. My ancestors came through there in the middle and early 1800s on their way to Buxton, Canada. But some decided to stop. Why? Because there was a great brick-making industry going on, there was coal mining going on, and it was located between two mountains under trees, very dense area, where slave catchers could not find them. What did they do? Generally, after setting up and getting jobs, they began to socialize where? In the Miller home. The Miller home became too small, and they built a facility on what they call the West End on Lancaster Street. The congregation began to grow bigger, and then they started to raise money, and they were given a piece of land by a hotel owner by the name of Barry, Edward and Mattie Berry, on which to build the Mount Zion structure. So it became very important in terms of social hub, cultural hub, artistic hub, and economic hub. That's the Mount Zion Black Cultural Center, which was about to face the wrecking ball about 20 years ago, before someone in our community, one of our cultural bearers, stepped in and said, no, no more tearing down of our industry. Everything else has been destroyed, the school, the hotel, etc. We need to save this for a population that needs it now. Was that brief enough?
That was great. There's so much more to the story, so I'm glad you're not leaving the stage quite yet. We'll get back to you in just a moment. Omar, for you, we just heard a little bit from Chair Jackson about what Citizen Institute on Rural Design, or as we'll probably refer to it now, CIRD, is all about. I'd love it if you could tell us just a little bit more broadly about what it is you do in the program, and then specifically what you did in Athens.
Okay, yeah, happy to. As a bus driver, what I usually I'll go there. So my name's Omar Hakeem. I'm an Arab American person. I'm wearing a blue jacket with a blue shirt, and I have dark hair. What do we do at CIRD? I mean, we get to work with rural communities across the country and help realize their visions. And it's I will make a rural generalization, but I think it's an important one to make. When you work with people that don't often have a lot of resources, you get to work with people who are also resourceful. And that is an absolute pleasure as an architect, to work with people who are so resourceful. So that's kind of our joy, and also get to work with people like T and Ada and others on their team that are just wonderful, strong, amazing leaders that inspire us. But we get to work all up and down the spectrum. So we look at kind of the large-scale vision all the way down into the building, kind of examining every different piece of it. Another kind of generalization I guess I'd say is good design is informed design. You have to be informed about the work you're doing. Otherwise, in my opinion, it won't be successful. It won't do all the things that we need to design to do in the built environment today, which is a lot, because we're dealing with a lot as a country. And it's important that we really kind of swing hard. So how do we get informed? We talk to people. And one of the things that CIRD allows us to do is work with communities over a longer period of time. So we're connected for at least 18 months. And in the case of Mount Zion, you know, it's been 4 years. And, you know, we get to be friends and colleagues and partners. And so we have time and space to listen and understand better the vision that people are seeking. And we also have space to get down into the details. And it's important for me as an architect to offer the work of an architect from a technical perspective as well. So it's not just visioning and post-it notes and that kind of stuff. We get in and build, like in the case of Mount Zion, you know, a building information model, a parametric building model, so that we have an understanding of how the building is working. We work on floor plans. We try to understand the sectional quality of the building. Like, you know, the church has a sloped floor. How does that play into the fact that it might be a multi-purpose space? And the pews, which are beautiful, are built to be built, you know, to set on a sloped floor. And so we're getting into that level of detail and also trying to expand and think big about their future, because they have so much energy, so much passion. You all do, T. And you're going to be outgrowing your building soon. And how do we do that in a smart way and grow and expand? So trying to get all the way across the board is important to us.
I'll just note, as probably everyone in the audience has noticed, we have some images of the project scrolling behind us. T, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what's been going on recently in Athens, some of your recent success and how you've been able to pull off what you've been able to pull off.
Well, with this brilliant model for us to follow, you know, we had hundreds of hours of work to do. And so we started immediately working toward the political arena. And I'm so happy to announce that the governor's office of Appalachia awarded Mount Zion $7 million plus. 3 months. So we have been busy, as you can imagine. But prior to that, we did find out when March roared in like a lion, that it's reported to be, it took out one of our windows. And we found out that one of those stained glass windows had been manufactured in Japan in 1906, and the technology almost could not be duplicated anymore. So before starting to shake up that building and get it ready, because it's been vacant for 20 years, as you saw some of the images, we needed to take out our most precious asset, which was those $1 million windows. So we did. We had them removed and plywood put there and faux stained glass murals developed to go on those windows. So that we just recently had an unveiling of those faux stained glass windows, which was also gave the history. So when you think about art being used as a historical restoration of things that have happened in the past, that's exactly what happened with our muralists, who did research not only with historians, but with our cultural bearers, those who had actually been part of that. And here you see that magnificent piece there with captioning on the bottom telling you exactly what happened there. So this is where we're moving right now in terms of finishing the rest of the windows with murals and having an unveiling ceremony.
Thanks so much for that. This is always a risky thing to do when the house lights are down and there's bright lights in your eyes, but how many of you in the audience live in rural places? You can define that any way you'd like. Okay, quite a few, maybe about half the folks here. So knowing that, I'm sure there are folks who are tuning in virtually in similar situation. I'd love to get at some of the lessons from the work that you all have done together and that you're leading now, T, for other people leading similar projects, renovating important cultural spaces in rural communities. What kind of assets should folks look for in their own communities? What's the special sauce, if there is any?
For us, we live in a community with about 20,000 students at Ohio University. With that kind of resources available, and you needing research to find out exactly what and how, the first place we went was to that university, to the business school, to do some research to find out exactly what should this building become. And for a whole semester, a professor in his class researched about 2,000 students, alums, even talked to the businesses uptown to find out exactly what should happen in this building. The number one choice that they requested, if you can believe it, was a soul food restaurant, okay? And the other aspect was, of course, you better have Wi-Fi, because we want to hang out there, okay? Again, the social hub for a group of people that had no place to go, actually. And we have maybe between 2,000 and 3,000 not only descendants of Africans, but from Asian countries, from the Middle East, from everywhere, that are students there that don't really do the bar scene that you know that usually happens in towns there. So that was the little 35-page executive summary that we handed over to CERD to say, please take it. We had no idea that they would then go out into surrounding communities to really find out, and we found out that the surrounding communities had no place to go either. So then we had to look at ourselves again and say, well, my God, we're gonna be a regional center, not just for Athens, but for all of the surrounding communities that have minority areas. There's a lot out in the district who identify as WINs. That's probably a term you may not know. Anybody know what a WIN is? Okay, those are folks who cohabited with our indigenous population, as well as there was a lot of Germans that moved into that area with lots of money that hired a lot of those people. A WIN is a white Indian Negro. and many identify. We have there was a huge population of Shawnee there. So we will become a hub for the regional, not only of our ancestors, but for the international population as well as the winds.
Thanks so much. We're just about already somehow at time, but Omar, I'd love to hear your perspective too. We're working through CERT in 8 communities now, and you've worked in so many other rural places. Anything that you think can be drawn from the story?
Yeah, very briefly. Just start something, because as you can tell from T, the energy of the kind of inertia that you feel when you work with someone who's just passionate and has started with something is contagious, and others will follow. So don't kind of wait for the grant or the whatever. Just start. And then it may be cliche in the design world at least, but community engagement, talking to people, I think especially in rural places, if everybody's not on board, it's really hard to move things forward. And when things slide back a little bit, it's hard to kind of move them forward again. So start arms wide and get as many people into the conversation. And of course, when you get people into the conversation, you have to respond to what they're saying and listen. So if that means shifting something, shift. But arms wide and just start marching it forward.
Great, thanks so much. Join me in thanking these two wonderful speakers. I'm now going to invite our next 3 speakers up. We have 2 folks from the Department of Public Transformation, Ash Hansen and Serena Otavi, the Creative Executive Officer and Activate Rural Program Director, respectively, as well as Ann O'Keefe Jackson with the Minnesota Arts, Director of Minnesota Arts. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. Hello, everyone. Hello, Council. My name is Ash Hansen. I'm a white woman with light brown hair, and I'm wearing a black shirt. I also drove a little yellow school bus across the country, interviewing rural artists before starting the Department of Public Transformation, which, in addition to being a play on words, is an artist-led nonprofit organization that develops creative strategies for increased community connection, civic engagement, and equitable participation in rural areas. We are committed to working with artists as agents of change, to illuminate and transform systems that have historically maintained an equitable access to resources for rural residents. We also act as an intermediary, distributing funds directly to individual rural artists, organizations, and communities, and operate as translators and pollinators, promoting urban-rural solidarity. We have our home base, the Yes House, which is an in-progress creative community gathering space in the town of Granite Falls, Minnesota, population 2,700, on colonized and occupied Dakota land. Through our projects and relationships, we strive to be good stewards of the land and its stories. As you heard, each rural community is unique. You've been to one small town, you've been to one small town. However, there are a few challenges that are pervasive in many rural contexts, primarily caused by, as Chair Jackson mentioned, decades of disinvestment. We seek to address some of these through our work: social isolation, rural blight, and narratives of despair, all with a lens towards geographic equity in philanthropy and rural representation in arts and culture and civic leadership opportunities. We have a 150-year vision because we know this is generational and relational work. Rural work comes with a deep level of compassion and understanding of the long-standing extractive economic practices and increased politically divisive propaganda that has led rural communities to an ingrained sense of narratives of scarcity, isolation, and apathy. We invite you to join us in actively pushing against these narratives by expressing abundance, connection, and ambition, and by advocating for diverse and creative rural futures. We do this on a local, regional, and national level through programs that support rural artists with our Ignite Rural at-home artist residency, providing living stipends, wellness funds, and project budgets for rural BIPOC and Native arts leaders to do their work in and with their home communities across the Upper Midwest, which was supported in part by the NEA. Thank you. We connect rural arts and artists and municipalities through our Rural Civic Arts Partnership Program, working with rural leaders to expand the understanding and the value of working with artists in the civic realm. We nurture the rural arts field through programs like Beyond the Clock, monthly learning exchanges for rural connectors and cultural workers across the country, and we activate rural assets through the Activate Rural program, which we're here to discuss with you today. And with that, I'm going to turn to my colleague, Serena, to explain what our Activate Rural program does. Serena.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, I'm Serena. I am an Arab American woman, long brown hair, and a yellow scarf. The Activate Rural program is near and dear to my heart, and it is a learning lab, a public workshop series. The Learning Lab portion of the program started last year with 5 teams from around the state of Minnesota. The goal was to work with teams located in communities of under 10,000 people, and in Minnesota communities, but also the Native nations that share this geography. And you can see the images that are rolling. These are the locations, the teams that we're working with around the state, and they're all focused on cultivating creative physical places of connection. And they're all taking on building projects in their communities. They're creating spaces for themselves. 3 out of the 5 projects are BIPOC-driven or Native-driven, Native-owned spaces, including Anne here that'll talk more about her project. We are working towards equitable access to financial and social capital and public participation, process transparency around projects. Each team received $25,000 in community engagement, for community engagement projects working with artists, but they're all artists and activators themselves. They also, we work really closely with them, or I'm basically like a coworker to them. We do monthly check-ins. I provide the technical pieces, but also emotional support. Sometimes we're just checking in on like, how is it going? All the challenges that they're going through, all the, even the pressures that they have within their community to make something like that happen. And then workshops and other resources. And the Learning Lab is funded through the Mellon Foundation, and then the public workshop series just launched this year is funded by our Minnesota Employment and Economic Development Agency.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Serena. And Anne, I'm so glad you were able to join us for this discussion as a long-term friend and partner of DOPT and a participant of the Activate Rural cohort. Can you tell us about your organization, Minnesota Arts, the importance of owning and stewarding your own space in Redwood Falls, Minnesota, and what led you to seek support from DOPT's Activate Rural program?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ann O'Keefe Jackson. I'm Dakota from Lower Sioux in Morton, Minnesota. So Minnesota Arts, so Minnesota is actually a Dakota word. It means cloudy waters. So it was important to have a space that recognized we were on Dakota homelands in that area. So it's a Native-run 501c3 organization, and it was important to have that space. It's 6 miles right outside of our reservation in Morton, and so it was important for us to reclaim that space in Redwood Falls, where there's historically or no currently any Native-owned property in that space. But to bring a connection to the history, the colonized history, accurate history of Dakota people and Native artists in general from across the country, to give an opportunity for their voices, their artwork to be seen, and to have that in that area and to be a catalyst for community conversations. So really what drove me to applying for this program is the experience in working with Ashley in the past, being inspired by her work in recreating and wanting to redo a building. I've wanted to redo a building for, I don't know, forever. I mean, we're to the point where people think I'm crazy, so I knew Ashley would be understanding. And to really understand that you need to have that physical space for people to be in, to have a safe space. Our space will even have a commercial kitchen because like a lot of cultures, when we gather, we eat. And so it's always important to have space where you welcome people in that way. For Dakota people, to be a good relative is to be everything. And so we really want to have a space that's safe, where people can gather and really share intimate conversations and learn from each other.
Thank you, Anne, and it has been such an honor to learn from and with you in our region. Serena, in your role, you work with arts and community leaders and asset activators across rural Minnesota and beyond. What are some of the recurring challenges facing these leaders and projects, and why is building ownership, access to capital, and creating third spaces like the one Anne is creating so important for marginalized community members in rural places?
Yeah, it started, or my journey, I should say, started from my home community in Granite Falls. From my experiences there, when I moved back, took on a building project. And I was young, it was a while ago, younger, and I wasn't taken seriously. Trying to go on that journey of accessing capital was very difficult for me. When I would be in the room, they would assume, the white guy with a beard next to me, which I later married, but they thought he was the one that, they should be talking to about this project, the building project we took on. But it was like, no, it's me. And even, it took me joining, I became a city council member in my community for people to take me seriously. And like, this is a legitimate project. We are gonna make this happen. It did, anyway, eventually did happen after 5 long years. So I know firsthand what people, or like leaders like Anne, activators, that it takes to make something like that happen in their community. It's not easy. It is a long process, and there are a lot of no's. And local banks aren't willing to support projects like this that are much needed in communities. It does have to be coming from the funding resources. You have to get really creative about it and figure out where it's coming from. And so, yeah, the funding piece is a reoccurring, always there challenge, but it's also the credibility piece, people like taking you seriously when you're going on that journey. And in terms of third places, for a long time now, our communities, there's been an erosion in gathering places in our rural communities. For example, Jasper, a community of 600, one of our Activate rural teams, they only have a gas station left for folks to gather. Their cafe is gone, the school is gone, churches are, also gone. So all those traditional places no longer exist. And so they're trying, so what are those, what is the next step? What are the new spaces? What do they look like? And they look like the people I'm working with, they are reinventing those gathering places and what it means to develop those building spaces in rural communities. And so that the ripple effect of one space, like what Anne is doing, is tenfold in a rural community of 600, 1,000, 2,000. And yeah, that work needs to happen.
And it takes a long time and maybe can't be done in a 1-year grant cycle? Yes, okay. And there seems to be an increased trend in philanthropy and in national organizations to provide technical assistance to local organizations and leaders. Can you talk about the type of assistance that's most useful to you in your role that you have received, either through Activate Rural, or are there any other assistance or resources that would be most helpful for rural arts leaders like yourself?
Well, one of the biggest resources was Serena and Ben helping to develop my website. Because those are some of the barriers as far as applications. You need to have a link to your website, and I'm not very techie. So, and that was kind of as you're trying to find money to purchase a building, insure it, work through your dumpsters and all that, and then to figure out how to, develop your own website, which is essential to do any funding. So it was a great help. Just the endless amount of support that I get from them of even knowing that I can call them and say, hey, I'm trying to figure out this grant application. Can you review it? Can you read it? All of that support, that's been extremely helpful. And because some of these organizations, even Ben and I had spoke a little bit about the government or community granting funding that requires you to have support from local government is somewhat of a barrier too, because a lot of times for BIPOC or Native or people of color, like, you don't have that support. Sometimes they don't see the value of you or your work in these communities. So to have someone sign off on that support is very difficult, and can sometimes be a barrier to what you're trying to accomplish. Because even as, you know, some people in town have said to me, like, well, then this is just for Native artists. Like, no, Native art is art. And so for you to, like, for people to understand that, that's not, thank you. And yeah, it's not just for certain people. It's not for just your own community. It's for everyone, and to find value in that, so.
Thank you for naming both of those really important points about support and Native art is arts. And you take a really unique approach to the technical assistance world. Serena, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, when we refer to technical assistance, we aren't providing trainings or, you know, workshops on how to do things. The leaders that we're working with, they know how to write a grant. If Anne wanted to make a website happen, she probably could figure it out. But they don't have the time. They all have full-time jobs. They're trying to make this other piece work. So what we're giving back is the time, and so I will I'll draft up the bylaws for you. I'll make your articles of incorporation happen. We'll do your website. We'll make it happen. We don't need to teach you how to do all these things, because it just needs to get done. And that's what the Activate Rural team, we're there for, is we're trying to just get that stuff done for them.
Thank you both. And just this importance of valuing local, existing, rural assets and talents and leaders, funding pathways to capacity over short-term project-based opportunities. Because everyone, regardless of where they live, deserves equitable access to welcoming communities, well-designed gathering places, and thoughtful programming to express their creativity, their traditions, their art forms, and expand their social networks to increase overall civic engagement and quality of life. So we're about to invite our friends back up, Ben and Omar and T, to engage in a conversation with the council as well. But just, you know, in hearing this and some of the challenges that we're facing related to access to resources, we encourage each of you that are in positions of wealth redistribution to look at your funding portfolios, and whatever percentage you are currently giving to rural places, double it, at least. And maybe we'll get closer to that 20%, which is how much of the population lives in rural areas. And I'll hand this microphone over to Ben when you guys get back on stage here. Let's welcome our other presenters back to stage.
Thanks so much. Another round of applause for all of our wonderful speakers today. We have just a few minutes left, and we'd love to have a little bit of a conversation with our council members. Love to hear questions that you all have. Yes, please.
Thank you all for participating. It's been incredibly exciting and informative and moving to spend time here in Southeast Ohio and to visit rural communities and hear from leaders like you. So thank you. I'm curious, Dr. T, we got the benefit of seeing your vision yesterday in Athens, and it's really impressive what is happening there. I'm curious, you know, we heard from...
Speak into the mic a little bit closer, please.
Okay, we heard from Chair Jackson earlier about the role of arts in community connection after the community center is built. Is there a role for arts in the organization, in the community center, to bring people together?
Oh, absolutely. And we've already started. We do a bunch of service learning projects within the elementary through high school. As a matter of fact, we completed one during the year of saving places, which the National Trust actually implemented. And we asked those high school, elementary kids, if you had a place to save, what place would you want to save and not have torn down? Because this is what we're trying to do, save a place for you and for in your history. And these used art. A young man casted a ceramic piece of his bedroom. And he said, and here, he had the little fan, the television set, all of that. He said, and here I am king. If it was destroyed, it would be like tearing a limb from my body or a limb from a tree. So right now, we have a program, actually it's a fundraising program, but through art, we're teaching history and math. A young lady developed a logo for the Quarters to Freedom Project. The Quarters to Freedom Project. In it, there's a quarter with the Mount Zion building in it, and they're saving quarters to see how many miles and how many quarters can be raised from Athens on the trail to Buxton, Canada. And one of the teachers revealed to me that the 5th graders had their quarters lined up in the hallway, and the 6th graders was looking to see how far they went, so they needed to know how many more quarters they needed to get, okay? But they have learned how many quarters it takes to get to Columbus, for example. How many to get to Akron? How many? That is an ongoing project, and now that some of them have graduated from elementary school to intermediate school, it's happening in the intermediate school. Some have graduated to high school, and they're in high school now, and they call themselves the Andrew Jackson Davidson Club, the AJD Club, because they also found out that in our county courthouse, they say that every lawyer that had ever practiced in Athens, their picture is hanging there. Through their class, they looked and they saw Andrew Jackson Davidson's picture was not there, a black man. And so they rallied together and went to the judge and said, we want Andrew Jackson Davidson's picture hung in the building also. So there's social service projects that are taking place. They found a picture, and one of the young ladies with some art skills in intermediate school drew a picture of Andrew Jackson Davidson. Andrew Jackson Davidson's wife was General Custer's cook, General Armstrong Custer's cook, and he worked with the Hotel Berries that I mentioned before, a building that was torn down, that was built in early 1800s, 1890s, and probably the richest black man, or maybe man, period, in Ohio at the time, with the Hotel Berry. Theodore Roosevelt visited there. Carl Sandburg visited there. That was one of the buildings that was torn down. And it was this history that we were teaching the kids in the schools in order for them to develop an appreciation of the history, and they did, and they have, and they continue to combine art not only with history, but art with social studies. So we will continue doing that kind of thing within the community, and the college, of course, is cooperating, and a graduate student is don't give them a thesis to come up with. They will come up with an art piece to work with those kids within the system, so we hope to continue carrying that out.
Thank you, fantastic.
I have a question. I work with rural communities in Kansas, and something I always run into is the strong leadership that I see in all these communities. For Omar, what do you think are the advantages of working in these smaller, hyper-local rural communities?
I mean, you mean for the leaders themselves? Yeah. I think, you know, there's a possibility. I mean, I think all over our country, all towns, cities, everywhere, there's cultural identity. But in rural communities, I have had, you know, I've experienced that they have such a strong and sometimes unique rural cultural identity, like T was talking about, the kind of Black Appalachian rural identity. And when you have that so clear, I think it is also, there's potential to then kind of amplify that and to strengthen it, and that's a really exciting and I think energizing opportunity to really kind of help galvanize rural identity. And that is just, I think, again, that's so important where we are right now as a country, and to make sure that those fabrics stay intact and not just stay intact, but continue to strengthen. So we need that, and I think rural leaders are really poised are doing that work and are poised to be doing more of it, and hopefully via forums like this, that work being shared. So that's a great opportunity.
Aloha friends, I'm Christopher. Thank you for the really powerful work you're doing. Point I want to emphasize and then a question. I so appreciate the way you're approaching technical assistance. Saving people time so that they can manage the capacity of the many things that they're all holding is valuable, and I want every funder to really hear that and think about that. Thank you. So thoughtful and smart. I'm curious about trust building, because these partnerships are working within your communities, but also bringing in outside perspectives, and sometimes that can be really delicate. I really appreciated, Omar, when you said arms wide open and bring as many stakeholders to the table and hear as many voices. But I wonder if any of you could talk about some of the ways that you started to really feel or build trust with some of the outside funders or CERD or other folks that kind of come into your communities and, you know, are trying to help but are not of that community.
I mean, I'll touch on that and I'll pass it to you, Ashley. But yeah, I'll speak more to the Activate Rural piece of it, because we definitely thought of that through our process and thinking through how we're gonna develop the programming, which is a big part of just the work that I do, is that I wanna make sure that anytime we do start our work in a community, that we understand that building trust takes time, which is why we need at least 2 years. And we're already thinking about, okay, how can we continue even beyond that? Because we don't want to just work for a little time and then leave. That's not how DOPT wants to work with community. Like our partnership with Ann, I want it to go beyond, because the project's not done in that time frame. It's gonna keep going, and that support is still needed. And so that is one way. And then also, I know our organization has done a lot of, like when we do bring in funders to meet, or to meet our projects or whatever the case is, we do a lot of the pre-work in advance to make sure we have an understanding of, be clear about the why you're coming. Is it because you may have, funding opportunities, or are you just learning about? So just being clear up front, and what does that look like? And then what are the next steps, like afterwards? Is there gonna be a follow-up? So just being clear about the intentions behind visits is really important. You could probably speak more to that.
You hit the 2 points I wanted to bring up, but I just wanted to say too that we're very mindful of extraction, as a lot of our communities have experienced extraction, and so consistency is key. Sticking around for and with them, and the way that you enter and the way that you stay in relation and in right relation with the community, and sometimes knowing that you will get off track sometimes, and that how do you acknowledge, own up to that? How do you continue to have transparency and accountability in your processes, and saying like, hey, we had a misstep. Can you help us get back on track? Can we do this together? Because we're here for the long haul.
I thought what you were speaking of earlier, what's so clear that rural communities are isolated sometimes geographically as well as psychologically. And I'm curious, in Athens, where does the connection happen? Obviously the NEA doesn't have offices in every region in the country. How do people in rural areas, what do we need to be doing to make sure people are aware of what's available in terms of capital and resources? Because I see that disconnect as really being a challenge.
Send in money.
And I wanted to piggyback on that, saying, and help us tell our stories. I mean, so often the documentation piece of it is something we're also responsible for on top of everything else. So if funders can also help us tell our stories and help us lift up our own experiences and expertise, that's really useful too. So just to piggyback on that.
I'll just add to the network building component of it. we spend a lot of time when the Citizens Institute on Rural Design program kind of launches its application portal. I don't know how many people, sign up for this newsletter or that newsletter. We spend a lot of time literally calling every rural practitioner, every community development corporation, every rural health hub, and I say, hey, do you know about this? Do you know about this? We all put in lots of hours. And I'd love to see stronger networks happen that would allow some of this information to be disseminated and disseminated easily, because people are wearing so many hats. Ben joked about the bus driver and the mayoral candidate, who's probably now the mayor. He, like in Spring Grove, where you guys have been working, the person leading that project is the school guidance counselor. He's on the Board of Education in that region, and is helping lead this project. And I think he was doing one other thing, like Scott, just busy guy, has a lot going on. So how do we get that information out? And I think stronger networks, some of that's happening. I was happy to see the Art of the Rural kind of lifted up in the New York Times recently. More of that, more kind of understanding and strengthening and sharing the stories of the people that are already network building as well.
Great. And I said, of course, what I said was very important, but I want to second this to what Omar is saying, especially, I mean, I read your newsletter, okay? But it has no or very little value and connection to the community in which I serve and where I inhabit, which is a college community. So you've got to do more on social media. You just have to. You have to let them know exactly what and how important the art is to every part of their life. That's not happening. I don't see it happening. When I talk to students, we created something called the Heritage Square Tour, where we take students around the different, well, now they're plaques, or not, the buildings are no longer there, but to see what had been there. And when they find out what had been there, they find a certain pride in knowing that there was history here. There was history connected to that particular art piece there. And first thing they said, well, is it on TikTok? No, it's not on TikTok. Is it on Instagram? You know what I'm saying? So I think one of the important things is that you have to reach out to this growing public that is about to. I have a granddaughter here that is so connected to this until almost uncommunicative, verbally. You know what I'm saying? So yes, you have to really, I think, do a better job with the internet and that entire spectrum of this emerging world.
Can I add one thing too? I think it's important, if possible, to visit these areas, like with, it sounds amazing, your space, but to actually go there, and then you can see and hear what the work is about, and that's what really engages people and funders to say, that's important. Even I was lucky enough to speak with a funder from Blandon, and to be able to tell her and speak to her to my story personally is much more ability to connect than just grant applications. And even sometimes the disparity of, larger organizations who have professional grant writers who write for them. When you have these smaller rural communities, like you said, we're all doing all these different jobs. We're trying to write grants too, and it might not be as professional as some of the other ones. But so maybe looking at building those relationships and taking into account that these smaller communities have people doing all this work, but to actually visit and see the value in those spaces.
We're just about at time. I'll just take moderator's privilege and also answer the question with a bit of a meta answer, which is that we're doing it right now, I think. We have a lot of rural arts leaders listening in from virtual audience and folks in the crowd right here today. I'll just mention we have grant opportunities coming up. July 11th, the deadline for grants for arts projects, and then August 1st for our Our Town program. So one way in which we get out the word is by doing events like this and visiting spaces like your space in Athens and sharing our opportunities that way. Happy to chat about that when we're done today. I think maybe we have time for one more question, or is it time to wrap us up? if anyone does have another question.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I have a question in relation to I mean, the word saving buildings was used yesterday a little bit and today. And I'm always curious, you know, when you try to save a building, a landmark, a historical space, are you preserving the building as it was, or are you preserving the culture that this place hosted for many generations at times? And the questions, you know, you also mentioned, Omar, you know, there's sometimes some pushback and you have to adjust. And I wonder, when you do this research in terms of repurposing a building, preserving it as a building, but also try to create the culture that was there, but also accommodating an ever-shifting culture too. And how long is that time frame where you do the research to let's say, you build a performing art center in an old building? How long does that take? And what kind of, who are the people you're meeting to gather the data that you need? And is it also cross-generational, or is it only people who had the past in connection to that specific site?
I'll try to answer that as best I can. But, you know, someone mentioned, Christopher, you asked a question about technical assistance and kind of entering your community. I am never going to be able to, nor is my team, really be deep enough and gain enough trust because of the amount of time that takes. So we really rely on other, you know, community organizations, community organizers to be kind of the sharers of that story, the connectors. And so trust happens that way, but also, like Ash said, being in place and staying as long as possible. So we say, okay, yeah, this grant program for CERT is 2 years, but like T and I have stayed in touch, and like I'm not going anywhere. You know, we're around. But to answer your question about the story and the timeline around the preservation of buildings, I think of it as there's memory in these spaces. It's for me, it's mostly about that. It's about what is the memory, and then what is the story that needs to be told based on our context now today, and hopefully thinking into the future related to that memory. Because I think at times we preserve buildings in a state in which they are vulnerable and in which maybe they're not the happiest memories. Like you're capturing and you're saying, save this, crystallize it, put a glass jar on top of it, and also all the things that come with it about its sadness as it had deteriorated. And so what we need to do then is leverage that as a way to tell the story, share a memory that is maybe painful, but also important. And so that's what it is for me, at least, is to capture that memory in that moment, understand that there are many other stories, and use it as a catalyst to make change in the world by sharing these moments. So it could be the current context, it could be a certain specific era, but it's, you know, we do have to recognize that all of these things are temporal. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you so much.
And I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on that because I do come from that historic preservation background, and I've taken on this journey where I've entered more now the arts world, because I've seen the advocacy and the, I don't know, it's a different type of movement in rural communities when you work with the artists and activators in communities. And I just wanted to lift up in the work that we do around buildings, it's also about diversifying building ownership. And so when you mention preservation and saving, we don't use those terms when we use activation, because it is largely white-owned buildings in our rural communities. And so with the Activate, we are trying to push that, and so that there's more native-owned, like taking it on where Anne is actually taking on probably a former white-owned building. And so it's not preserving what it was in the past. It is completely changing who it is, so that it is progressing and becoming a different space and the memory's there. It's no longer applicable to like what we need it to be today. And so that whole, like, changing the system around what it means for building ownership in these rural communities.
And with that, I just want to thank you all so much for traveling here to Columbus and sharing your wisdom with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So thank you again to all our discussion participants, to the council members. Ben, thank you for your leadership in organizing this conversation. Thank you to our ASL interpreters. I want to express a gratitude to the Ohio State Arts Council and our NEA staff who made all of this possible. And thank you to all of you who are doing your work in the audience, and especially to those of you working in rural communities and small towns. Our time together, I think, has been really illuminating and inspiring. As the final piece of business, I'm pleased to announce that the National Council on the Arts has reviewed the applications presented, and that a tally of the council members' ballots revealed that all recommendations for funding and rejection have passed. So thank you for your work on that. Our next council meeting will be held virtually, October 24th through 25th. We'll have a special emphasis on local arts agencies and also on the role of arts in disaster response and recovery. The NEA is bolstering support for local arts agencies and increasing its investments in LAAs with the launch of the Local Arts Agencies National Cohort Program. And this program, through this program, the NEA seeks to build and strengthen a network of local arts agencies across the country, creating an opportunity for leaders to establish a learning community and share and exchange tools and strategies to respond to changes and challenges in the field. And we hope to offer resources and other assistance to LAAs based on best practices. To inform this work, we're currently managing a 2-part research study about local arts agencies and look forward to sharing more about that soon. So I invite you all to join us online for the next meeting. We hope that you'll follow the work of the NEA on social media and engage with the important work the agency is doing in supporting initiatives in your communities and communities nationwide. So thank you for attending. Thank you for tuning in. I invite everyone here in person to join us for a meet and greet with the council members and with me in the Lincoln Ballroom upstairs. And with that, the 213th meeting of the National Council on the Arts is now adjourned.